An Aryan brother is without a care. He walks where the weak and heartless won't dare. And if by chance he should stumble or lose control, his brothers are there to help reach his goal. For a worthy brother, no need is too great. He need not ask, fulfillment's his fate. For an Aryan brother, death holds no fear. Vengeance will be his, through his brothers still here. For the brotherhood means just what it implies. A brother's a brother till that brother dies. And if he is loyal and never lost faith, in each brother's heart will always be a place. So a brother I am and will always be, even after my life is taken away from me. I'll lie down content, knowing I stood, head held high, walking proud in the brotherhood.
People that are older and know what time it is know it's just business.
Yeah. Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering Aryan Brotherhood members over the past 6 decades or so. Today we'll start with O, as in obituary. I hate to say it, but I got a lot of information from the obituaries, and a lot of these guys didn't live past the age of 40. Man, they say today that's about the halfway point in America as far as life expectancy. So take it from me and take it from their example. You don't want to get caught up in that life because usually it only leads to pain, addiction, misery, years in prison, away from your loved ones, and often an early death. Today I'll start off with Wendell Wayne Odom, who I think may be originally from Modesto. I show he was an Aryan Brotherhood member in the early 1970s when he was convicted of a voluntary manslaughter charge. He ended up appealing that, but pled guilty to an assault with a deadly weapon charge when he had a number as an Alpha 77925. I talked about him a little bit when I discussed Wayne Bulldog Lab, and they both were trainers for boxers at Folsom, including Bobby Brimage, as seen here. Understand that he was a regular figure on the yard of Folsom Prison during the 1970s, but I'm unsure what happened to him after that. In my research, I did find an individual named Wendell Wayne Odom, which is not a common name, that got into a shootout with Mojave County, Arizona deputies in the latter part of 2020. He is listed as being 36 years old, so it could be his grandson. I've stated it many times before, but often these guys are related, and unfortunately, many times they pass their criminal traditions down the line. Next, I'll talk about Stephen G. Olivares, who's from Manteca, a town located in central California. I show that he was convicted of a robbery charge in 1982, whereby he was assigned C number, as in Charles, 45911. I then show he paroled in 1984, but was given a violation and sent to DBI. He then was caught with a shank at San Quentin Prison, and I dealt with Olivares in the Violence Control Unit of New Folsom A5 building in the early 1990s. I recall him very well because he was known then as being a weapons maker. This guy could make a knife very quickly, and what they would do a lot of times is pop the sprinkler heads in their cells, often by lighting a fire underneath it, and the sprinkler head would go off. Well, those things pop off, and they would keep them as cutters. That sprinkler head is made out of aluminum and can easily cut up the weaker steel beds. I have noticed that he was close to Mike Tink Shepard, who I talked about when I talked about Gary Luttrell and Aaron Jerry Marsh. I show he was very involved in Pelican Bay politics and got into a major dispute with longtime Mexican Mafia member Henry Indio Carlos. I also show notes that he was involved in the homicide of his cellie, an inmate named Timothy Waldron. I don't show that Stephen Olivares is currently in CDC custody, so he may have been released after all these years. There is Joseph, a.k.a. Little Joe O'Rourke, who's out of Southern California. I show he was an Aryan Brotherhood member in the 1970s through early 1980s and was the owner of a small boat repair shop named Shamrock Boats. Imagine that. At that time, he was living in Long Beach, and he was accused of being the trigger man when 3 individuals kidnapped and killed Ricky Helt, age 29, of Long Beach over a drug dispute. Helt's body was found on October 9, 1977, in the parking lot of the Huntington Beach Public Library, located in Orange County. Police said that all of these individuals were members of the Aryan Brotherhood and named them as Ken Waterman, Randy Cosgrove, and Little Joe O'Rourke. Ken Waterman ended up testifying against O'Rourke, as did Steve Barnes. I understand that Barnes also testified against Angelo Bueno in the Hillside Strangler case. I had Bueno at New Folsom Prison, and I also did a true crime episode on the Hillside Strangler case where he and his partner, Kenneth Bianchi, were involved in kidnapping and raping, then killing multiple females in the greater Los Angeles area. Another individual who testified against O'Rourke was by then former Aryan Brotherhood councilperson Michael Thompson, who states he dropped out of the gang when the AB took out Barnes' father. O'Rourke was found guilty and, as I recall, was sent to death row, but his conviction was overturned in 1985, and I'm unsure what happened to him after that. There was Douglas, aka Doug the Thug, or who I talked about previously when I addressed Hell's Angels members who were Aryan Brotherhood's associates. I know this is a sore spot for many HAs, and there are 8-1 supporters today. But things were a little bit different back in the 1970s, and many of the whites had to stick together because they were outnumbered by the blacks and Chicanos. And according to CDC investigators, he was an Aryan Brotherhood associate when he had B number 26397, or was born on April 22nd, 1946 in Oakland, California, and grew up in a very rough neighborhood and was involved in street fights and petty crimes from an early age. He ended up dropping out of school and joined the Navy, but was discharged for bad conduct. It was at that time he became a bouncer at a strip club when he met some members of the Hells Angels. And he joined the Oakland chapter in 1967. And like I said, became well known in prison and out in the streets for being a very tough fighter. Longtime president and one of the earliest members, Sonny Barger, said he was the most violent guy he ever met, or was also featured in Hunter S. Thompson's book, Hell's Angels, The Strange and Terrible Saga of the Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs. But everybody meets their match one day, and on July 26, 1986, Orr was at El Treble Bar in the Mission District of San Francisco when it is believed that he was involved in a fight with a member of the Mongols motorcycle gang, bitter enemies of the Hells Angels. Fight escalating to a gun battle, and Orr was shot several times in the chest and abdomen. He was rushed to the hospital, but died soon after. He was only 40 years old. And here's another example of an HA also being an Aryan Brotherhood associate. I show that Roger Sparkplug Osborne, who was born on August 17, 1945, CDC number B is in Bravo. 10072 was also an associate of the Aryan Brotherhood. There was William, a.k.a. Bob Overton. I believe his middle name was Robert, but I could be wrong. And I also have notes that he was also called NC Bob, which I believe stands for North Carolina. I show that he also had a military background, but was involved in a homicide and I believe was housed in Oklahoma DOC. I believe that's before the Oklahoma Aryan Brotherhood even started. I'll cover some of the other state Aryan Brotherhoods in a future episode. But he ended up joining the Aryan Brotherhood because he saw they were the elite, and he always wanted to be part of elite groups. And by all sources, was a pretty intelligent and tough guy when he had E numbers in Edward 99866. He eventually ended up dropping out of the gang, and as with Michael Thompson, John Greshner, and Fred Crowell has appeared on numerous documentaries and YouTube videos talking about the Aryan Brotherhood. Orange County has long been known for supplying Aryan Brotherhood members, Nazi lowriders, and Public Enemy Number 1, both support groups of the ABs for decades. There was David Owens, who I believe was out of Orange County. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I do know that he was close to New York Crane, and they were involved in some bank robberies together. I understand that Owens had almost $4,000 on him when he was arrested. New York Crane ended up making a deal and stayed in the California Department of Corrections, but Owens was sent to the BOP. I do have multiple pictures of him in BOP custody, as shown here, with some of the heavy hitters, including Tommy Silverstein and Snell Hebley. And in this picture here is also seen Washington State Aryan Brotherhood member Wayne Bridgewater and Mexican Mafia shot caller Willie Bobo and Donald Stoney DeLoss sitting on the bench up front. A lot of people have asked me about getting pictures from this episode. Unless they're mine, I really don't have authorization to hand them out. I already got enough officers pissed off at me with these videos saying I'm putting out way too much information. But like I've stated many times before, this is really old information, sometimes 20, 30, or more years old, even going back to before the Aryan Brotherhood ever started. So I very much doubt that I'm jeopardizing any of their cases. But there's some guys who I call secret squirrels. They don't believe in talking about anything, but that's a whole different topic. If you want to know a little bit more about that, see my video on prison politics. I show that eventually David Owens dropped out, as many of these guys finally do, and testified against Tommy Silverstein in the D.C. Black Robert Chappelle murder case in November 1981 at Marion. And I'm unsure what happened to him after that. I'd imagine, knowing the wrath of Tommy, he probably went into the witness protection program and hid out. Speaking of witness protection program, I know one individual who, of course, I won't name, but he was a major figure during the 1980s in the prison gang world and ended up hitting Reuben Butch Pappan, who was a longtime Aryan Brotherhood member going back to the 1970s when he had B number 49426. Understand he was housed at CIM in October 1980 when T-Bone Gibson was killed. When I first heard that name, T-Bone Gibson, I mixed him up with the BGF Gibson. And I seem to recall some BGF members being hit by the ABs around that time period. But I went back and double checked, and somebody was right. Gibson was actually an Aryan Brotherhood member who was bad-mouthing the Mexican Mafia. And he was hit by Robert Blinky Griffin from Orange County and Junior Snyder from Bakersfield. Then somebody posted that I was incorrect again, that Blinky didn't hit T-Bone Gibson. That was Junior Snyder. Well, I just verified it recently. They both did. My very credible sources said they pulled the report on that one, and Blinky ended up cutting his neck, and Junior Snyder ended up stabbing him multiple times. So there's a good case in point where sometimes I don't quite get it right, but you guys have assisted me in narrowing it down when I research to re-verify the information I have documented. Anyways, getting back to Butch Pappan. He ended up coming back into the system in the 1990s with the E number as an Edward 37251. He ended up coming back on a parole violation in 1998 due to a carjacking and was indicted on the 2001 RICO case under BOP number 02699-078. I showed he was at the ADX from at least 2003 to 2006 and was released from the BOP in 2015. Reuben, a.k.a. Butch, a.k.a. Slim Pappan, died on September 29, 2016. Next, I'll cover James K., a.k.a. JP Penlon, was out of Long Beach. I show that he was incarcerated in CDC in 1979 for a homicide he did and was given C numbers in Charles. 26497. I then show that he was housed at Old Folsom Prison in 1982 and was moved to San Quentin in 1983. I show that when Pelican Bay opened, he was one of the first prisoners sent there, and he was found to be in possession of a shank in 1996 at Pelican Bay. Understand that he was on the Aryan Brotherhood Council and later on moved up to the State Commission and was indicted on the 2001-2002 RICO case under BOP number 208 05-038. It is my understanding then he was returned to Pelican Bay to at least the year 2006, but I believe is now currently deceased. There was Ronald Eugene, a.k.a. Big Ron, a.k.a. Perrin, who was out of Oakland. He was born on January 21st, 1941. I show when he was 15 years old, he was involved in a burglary and theft of motor vehicle and sent to the CYA in 1956. He then paroled in 1957, but soon came back on another theft of motor vehicle charge. I understand he ended up trying to escape from court and was convicted and sent back to the Youth Authority. He ended up paroling in 1958, but caught another theft of motor vehicle at the end of that year and tried to escape again from a hospital. Understand he also tried to escape from court on December 15, 1958. This guy was determined. He then was convicted of a theft of motor vehicle and a manslaughter charge in 1959, but paroled in 1960. It was at that time he was involved in multiple robberies with his brother Richard and a couple other brothers called the Cholosi brothers, who were out of Daly City. Understand they were found with multiple firearms on them, as well as money from multiple robberies they had pulled before they were finally caught. And he was sent to CDC in 1962 under A number as an Alpha 62430. I then show that he escaped from Soledad in 1962. Like I said, this guy was an escape artist and was always looking for the opportunity to take off. He then was arrested in Washington State on November 14, 1962, and returned to Soledad. Believe it or not, he escaped again on Cinco de Mayo, 1971. Maybe the Mexicans helped him out. I don't know. But I understand he fled down to Texas and was arrested on June 17, 1971, in Pasadena, Texas. I understand that he had also pulled a robbery in Huntsville and escaped again in 1973. I found out that he was captured in Fresno on October 19th, 1975, this time a San Francisco bank robbery he committed on July 15th, 1975, and was given 20 years and was sent to the federal BOP under number 35947-136. Then showed that he escaped custody while he was in the BOP in 1976 and was said to be involved in the homicide of La Cosa Nostra kingpin Vincent Papa in June of 1977 in the BOP. And believe it or not, was only validated as being Aryan Brotherhood by the feds in 1979 when he was housed at Marion. I show on April 26, 1979, he escaped custody at the Gainesville City Jail in Georgia. He ended up being captured by U.S. Marshals on January 4, 1980. And was returned to custody. Believe it or not, he was released from the feds in October 1982, and I understand died on September 10th, 2010. I'm not sure if anybody has as many escapes as Big Ron Perrin, except maybe Houdini. There was Robert aka Hillbilly Peterson, who was out of Northern California. He was sent to CDC on a forgery charge in 1988 under D number 77366. Then showed he paroled in 1989, but got returned to custody for possession of stolen property in that same year. He paroled again in 1990, but was returned to CDC for a robbery charge in 1991, when I dealt with him at the Violence Control Unit. I recall this guy as being not too smart, but very dedicated to the Aryan Brotherhood cause, and they would often use him to do hits. Some people call these types of individuals torpedoes, or even worse, crash test dummies. Understand he was released, but had a parole violation in 1999. He then was paroled again in the year 2000, but then came back into custody where he's named in the RICO indictments, and I believe paroled out of state. I'll briefly mention Waylon Pitchford, who, along with Aryan Brotherhood associate Jason Beaver Weaver, ended up killing longtime Black Guerrilla family captain Hugo Yogi Pinnell. Pinnell had been a thorn in the side of the brand since the 1960s. I'll explain him a lot more when I get to the BGF series. It is said that these prison gangs never forget, and they'll keep a name on a hit list for years. The more you have offended the gang, the higher on the hit list you go. And in 2015, on a New Folsom prison yard, he was executed just days after he was released from a security housing unit, where he had spent decades being locked down, and was relatively safe from previous attack, when he was shanked numerous times by Weaver and Pitchford. There was Christopher Eric Poore, aka Dusty. I show he was sent to the Youth Authority in 1986, but had paroled by 1988. He then was returned to custody, this time in the adult system, under E number as in Edward 6437. I believe he paroled on that number, but then got popped on a dope case in 1990 and returned to custody. He paroled in 1991. Understand he was a Nazi lowrider in the 1990s and was involved in the homicide of a Mark Kulikov. And this may have been sanctioned by the Aryan Brotherhood or a Nazi lowrider's shot caller, because I showed that he was later made Aryan Brotherhood. Maybe some of you former ABs and LRs can verify that. I believe he was sent to death row in that case. However, I could not find his picture. So if anybody has a picture of Christopher Eric Poore, aka Dusty, I'd appreciate it for my future reference. You can send those to gangpreventionservices@gmail.com. And finally, we have Curtis P. Price, whose place of birth was actually Oregon. However, he lived most of his life in California, and much of that in California penal institutions. I show he was first sent to the Youth Authority in 1965. He was released, but then got popped on a robbery in 1971. I believe that may have occurred in Montana, because I showed that in December of 1971, he pulled a gun on transport officers at the Deer Lodge prison and held them hostage for an escape. I believe he may have done some federal time, because I show he was at Leavenworth in March of 1976. I then show that he was at San Quentin in 1978 under B number 85822. I show that he was involved in the 1978 homicide of Leroy Banks for disrespecting the Aryan Brotherhood, but I don't believe he was ever charged in that case, because I show he paroled in 1981. Understand that Price was given an assignment to kill Barnes when he subpoenaed down to Chino CIM's Palm Hall in August 1982. This was around the same time period that the AV was reorganizing into a commission and council. He then picked up a contract to kill the father of Steve Barnes for the Aryan Brotherhood, because Barnes had testified in multiple cases and they wanted to set an example of what happens to snitches. On February 13, 1983, the body of Richard Barnes was found in his Temple City, California residence. He had been shot in the back of the head 3 times with a .22 caliber weapon. As police investigated the murder, they discovered that Barnes' son Steve had run afoul of the gang, and since they couldn't get to him, a vote was taken to take out the father. As I stated previously, several Aryan Brotherhood members dropped out over this decision, as they felt family members should be off limits. Apparently, one of the people voting to proceed with this was longtime Aryan Brotherhood shot caller Ronald McClue Slocum. Eventually, it was also found out that Price was involved in the first-degree murder of an Elizabeth Ann Hickey by tire iron blows while he was on the run. Less than a week later, she was killed in Humboldt County on February 19, 1983. Price was convicted of those murders and sent to San Quentin's death row. While he is on death row, according to staff and convicts, he was a general pain in the ass and known for running his mouth. Understand that one time he ran his mouth to the Mexican mafia, who then retaliated and commenced to beat him. At that time, well-respected Aryan Brotherhood member Billy Ray Hamilton came to his defense and took some blows for his AB brother. The date it happened was on August 26, 2007. Price remained on San Quentin's death row and died in August 2021 of natural causes. And so, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and continue watching this channel. I really appreciate your support. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for gangsters, cops, and politicians. An Aryan brother is without a care. He walks where the weak and heartless won't dare. And if by chance he should stumble or lose control, his brothers are there to help reach his goal. For a worthy brother, no need is too great. He need not ask, fulfillment's his fate. For an Aryan brother, death holds no fear. Vengeance will be his, through his brothers still here. For the brotherhood means just what it implies. A brother's a brother till that brother dies. And if he is loyal and never lost faith, in each brother's heart will always be a place. So a brother I am, and will always be, even after my life is taken away from me. I'll lie down content, knowing I stood, head held high, walking proud in the brotherhood.
People that are older know what time it is, man. It's just business.
Yeah.